So, hi, Dimitris. How was the EclipseCon? So, you also attended. We had a brief chat. So, you liked the conference? Was it busy? I just spent, I think, 1 hour at the conference. So, I have basically no impression.
For me, it was also the first time at EclipseCon Europe. First of all, I like the venue. It's a very nice venue. The big room is fantastic. And the type of people normally a bit different than what I'm used for normally. Like, it's a mix of developers. There's too many Eclipse people, obviously.
Yeah.
A lot of SGI people. But there was also a lot of micro-profile talks, which is great. There was quite a few Quarkus-related talks. So I think overall it was very nice, actually. I liked it. I might go again.
Yeah. So I delivered a talk and I look at the audience and I recognize his faces were most skilled micro-profile and micro-profile, even committers. So I said, why I should keep explaining, how it works. And I just changed a little bit the topics, how I see Jakarta and micro-profile on the fly. So for me, it's also interesting experience because usually in my talks are lots of developers on projects and the EclipseCon were more like a expert conference almost, I would say.
Yeah.
Cool. First, this week, I spent some time at the EHEX workshops and I missed Quarkus 1.0 GA. So it seems like Quarkus 1 is released, right?
Yeah, just last Monday. So it's this week, basically. So we're there. Actually, we released even a 1.01 yesterday because there was a security fix and, we wanted it out. So yeah, this is, it's a big milestone for Quarkus. It's a big milestone after 8 months in the community as a project, and then before that as a research project. And now I think we are at the point where we have a stable base. So the base APIs should be, stable. And then we can put more emphasis on extensions, more reactive stuff, usability improvements, and so on. So yeah, I think that was a big milestone for us in the community. Yeah.
Even more extensions. I recently just did, the Quarkus list extensions, and I found the amount of extensions basically doubled because you added all the camel stuff as well, right?
Yeah. No, you'll see like many more coming, and I want to point out. For the 1.0 release, we want to say thank you, to the community contributors and so on. And we had to do the exercise to, find them, who are they? And we had something like 97 external contributors, so that's outside Red Hat, and another 93 from inside Red Hat. So we're already 50-50 and a big number. So it's a good problem to have. Now we have to, send something, a t-shirt. And I think you're one of them, right? I saw your name in the committers list.
Yeah, I don't know what the committer, so my pull request was accepted, but it was trivial. But what I found, this is actually funny because I thought that there was like port in Docker missing or something, and I say, okay, I don't like to write, bug reports. I say, okay, it takes a long time and I have to describe everything, so let's just fix it and ship it, so it probably is easier and see what happens. And it was immediately accepted, and I said, okay, great, now I save some time, So this was actually time-saving experience.
Go.
Yeah.
No, we are all for time-saving stuff, basically. And the people are very much, no nonsense, and so no, it works pretty well.
93 developers. 93 developers at Red Hat. I didn't even knew that Red Hat has so many developers.
I didn't know either. No, seriously, because let's say the core team, it's not 93, but from all over Red Hat, people are coming up. Oh, here's a pull request. Here's a pull request. So again, it's a good problem to have people wanting to, to help and do stuff on the project. So that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's also dangerous, right? You should be careful to be still on track, not to accept too much, and to be still opinionated, right?
Well, every pull request goes through review. It's the standards are quite high to get in, at least for the important stuff. So there's still, many just waiting there. That's an important aspect you pointed out there. On one hand, you want this opinionated view and consistent. On the other hand, you want to expand and not discourage people from trying out things on Quarkus, right? Mm-hmm. To some extent, you might see a differentiation there. So far, pretty much like all the extensions became part of Quarkus, okay? And now we have some scheme to say that this is preview, this is stable, okay, just to separate the two. But the idea there is, and we put it that's in 1.0. So there's the Quarkus base, the Quarkus core, and then on top of that you have the Quarkus distribution. Mm-hmm. And in the Quarkus distribution we have what we call the Quarkus universe. Mm-hmm. So there you will get to see everything. You'll see all extensions, and again they will be split like preview, stable, and so on. Now, when all that comes to a state where it's supportable by Red Hat, okay, and that should come next year, Red Hat will do then our own evaluation and say, those pieces we're confident we can support like long term, and we will mark them as such. Those other things, you can use on your own, basically. So as to have both things, both have like an extensive ecosystem and also something for us that is, we feel we're confident with, we can support. So, yeah. So let's see how this goes. But that's the idea.
So, for my understanding, so what I understood is that we have some core Quarkus extensions, like for instance the arc, these dependency injection and JAXers, whatever, it just belongs to Quarkus. And then we have a broader set of extensions. This would be the Quarkus universe, and this could be whatever we like. So, and this will be still somehow maintained by Red Hat. So if I will do list extensions, I will see the entire universe.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's say there are three things. Yeah. There's the Quarkus core, which is like the core libraries and core extensions. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then there's more extensions that are written either by Red Hat or by external contributors that we consider to be like stable, and supportable. Mm-hmm. And then there will be all extensions. Mm-hmm. Everything else that would be visible to you so that you can use. We don't want to discourage people writing their own extensions, but for like this like full superset, we might not guarantee that this, will work in all cases or that we can support it like in the long term. But we want you to see them and be able to use them. Let's say you've written your own extension in-house, but nevertheless you want to publish it, but you don't want to support it yourself for others. Yeah. But it's still there. It might work for others without official support. So, yeah.
Yeah, but the question is, if I do the Maven list extensions from Quarkus, will be the way to see, the core extension and then the extended ones, or I would just see the core extensions? You know what I mean?
Yeah. There will be a way to differentiate and say, oh, I want all, or I want like the supported ones.
Hey, cool. Okay, this is what I thought, because everyone could write a Quarkus extension, but it doesn't have to be necessarily, at the Quarkus registries. So like everyone can build a Maven plugin, but it is not in Maven Central. And the list extension will search for the, I would say, more core extensions first, and then there will be a way to extend the search to the universe, right? Which is set of registered extensions.
Yeah. So I don't remember exactly the flag or how we're going to do it, but
but something will come.
Like yeah.
What could be also a nice idea to have something like composite extensions, because my only problem with Quarkus is from the beginning, I need a couple of extensions that are mostly the same. So I always need JTA, JAXRS, Panache sometimes, and so I need, I would say, and all small array extensions, basically the entire micro profile plus additional one. And what I did, I created a quirky archetype. The problem is Quarkus moves too fast, so I have frequently, update the versions. And it could be nice to have something like, let's say, how to call it? Let's say Adam extension or Duke extension, which comprises my own extensions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think you can properly emulate this by writing a no-op extension that, however, introduces the dependency to the thing that you're interested in. So when you include this, it includes everything else.
Yeah, this is actually a good idea. I will think about this. Because I create a lots of Quarkus projects, and I always have to do the same. And this could be actually solve the problem. So I get, Quarkus power with Jakarta E like look and feel.
Yeah, because now if you include, for example, I don't know, JAXRS, right? It will bring in CDI by default. So it's exactly the same mechanism.
You're right. So I will steal the ideas from JAXRS. I will take a look at the source code and try to experiment with it.
Okay. Perfect.
So, by the way, I think the Quarkus, I would categorize Quarkus one of the most popular or successful projects even in history of backend Java, I would say, except probably Tomcat at the beginning or something like this, because you said 8 months, and what I can tell you, in my projects, in my universe, is mostly backend Java, enterprise Java. Everyone knows about Quarkus. So this is what I can tell you. So if I have projects, I say, hey, you knew about Quarkus, either they say yes, and in more than 0.5% of all cases, they say 50% of all cases, they say we evaluating Quarkus right now.
Well, thanks for that, and thanks to the team and the community. I can tell you though that if you go a bit like more far out, you'll see it's still, it's not, there are places it's not very known. So like 2 weeks ago, I was invited actually to a conference in Romania, DevCon. I went there and few people knew about Quarkus. So there's still, let's say, virgin areas that, they don't know too much about it yet. So you'll find places if you go beyond the normal, the big conferences, and
I'm in Romania next week and Romania next year, so we could change that, I would say.
Where do you go? Where is it? What is it?
So next week is a private workshop, but I'm invited at Devox, either Cluj or Bucharest. I forgot about that.
Okay, great. Well, spread some Quarkus love then.
Cool. So I wanted to say Quarkus. Quarkus, Quarkus as well. So this will be the next project. Why we're actually talking? So the Quarkus 1.0 is in between, but I found your tweet where you. Oh, another thing before we start. Quarkus requires, it doesn't come with the all setting from Beans.xml. And what it means is I have to annotate classes in order to be injected. And so it works. But I frequently forgot about that. And then I got, crazy idea. What should be possible is actually to put artificial annotation on all the classes during Quarkus build, right? This should work.
So that's what you want to achieve with that?
The problem right now is that Quark usually in microprofile in Jakarta E, what I'm doing is in the Beans.xml I can say what's the name? some strategy all, and what it does is all the classes are injectable. It means if I in Jaxorize, I can just go with @inject and inject plain POJOs. So Quarkus does not support that. So what I have to do is I have to annotate my POJOs with dependent or default or whatever in order to be injected.
Okay.
But actually, it could be a hack because we have a Quarkus build. So what I could do is I could just put during the build annotation on all classes, right?
Suppose you could. Well, I think it's a usability issue.
Yeah, just usability.
Yeah. Have you started the thread somewhere on the list or?
No, it's just crazy idea. Just to talking with you. This was just a brief idea, and they say I could write the extension, whatever. I mean, this is not that hard. I did it with CDI extensions back then, and now I mean, what we only have to do is just to annotate all not annotated classes which I'm shipping, and this should be actually good enough.
Okay, so then I guess for your Quarky extension with all the dependencies, you could add this piece of functionality there as an optional thing, you know?
Yeah, but this could actually work. There's nothing, right? The only thing could be if I have too many classes, there could be some performance issues, which are potentially always, but I had the same problem back then with CDI. So, I mean, if it's too slow, we should somehow configure that. But
well, you know, we use this annotation indexer, Zandex, in Quarkus, where everything is loaded once, more or less, and there's very fast ways to query and say, oh, you know, give me all bins with these properties, and so it's quite fast. If you haven't,
so I would try it. There's Christmas around the corner, so there's more time to hack things. Okay, cool. So now the actual reason. So you had a tweet like, I'm writing a little bit Quarkus code to migrate away from SpringBoot to Quarkus, and this made me curious because I say, okay, this is actually interesting because I always get questions about Bootstrap. I say SpringBoot, and I have no experience with SpringBoot. Actually, all my projects are microprofile Jakarta. So first, why you are doing this? Why someone migrates from SpringBoot to Quarkus?
All right. So when we started Quarkus, of course, the first idea was let's do what we call greenfield development, right? You do new stuff. You have knowledge from Java EE, Jakarta EE, or microprofile, and you want to start with Quarkus and do things. I used to say that in reality, there's no such thing as greenfield. There's like maybe gray field, because anytime you start, you bring in your knowledge and you have to integrate with certain, things outside your application. Some frameworks, you want to use some libraries, you want to connect to Kafka or whatnot. And there's just too many people with this. They start with Quarkus, and the first thing that comes to their mind is, how do this? And many of them come from SpringBoot. SpringBoot is hugely successful, right, and known. So the idea is, what if we can offer some Spring APIs on top of Quarkus to make this transition easier? So you know how to write a Spring controller, so why not offer those APIs so someone could get started? So it's not like you can get an existing Spring Boot app and run it on Quarkus without any change. So that's not the intention, and this will quite likely never happen. But if you want to migrate your knowledge or even start breaking out an existing app and porting into Quarkus, you could start, with some familiar APIs and either keep them, or at some point, if you discover that the equivalent, let's say Jakarta or JPA, or those APIs are good enough for you, maybe you also migrate those. But so the idea was start implementing some Spring APIs to make transition easier, and see how that goes. And it's quite interesting. Did you see Giorgio's talk at Devox, by the way?
No, not yet.
No.
What I saw is a tweet like the Vodafone, I think, is migrating from SpringBoot to Quarkus, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, Vodafone was a kind of a different case because they took their SpringBoot app and they rewrote it on Quarkus. So
and why they did it?
They, according to them, right?
Yeah.
According to them, they saw it wasn't hard to do it. It wasn't hard. The APIs are not very different, and the functionality they offer, and they wanted to have more of a clean, let's say, implementation on Quarkus to go more to the Quarkus way, to the Jakarta microprofile, or Quarkus APIs. And it wasn't hard. That's why they said, it wasn't hard, and they got also, the productivity boost with the developer mode and all this stuff. Yeah. So that worked for them. Yeah.
This is interesting because if I deliver talks, after the talks, people came to me and asked me, should we migrate SpringBoot to microprofile? I say, I have no idea. I can just tell you what I am doing. If you like what you see, you can do it, or just keep running a SpringBoot. I have no idea. That this was more interesting in the tweet is because someone actually did it, and the question why they did it. So, what was the business case? So, I mean, SpringBoot said, a RAM. Okay, I never get it.
The business case was first of all, they had many apps, and they were very heavy.
Okay.
When we talked initially, they were telling us one of the main apps was taking 120 seconds to boot, right? 120, which was like a lot, and was taking a lot of memory, and they had many instances of that.
Okay.
And they were trying to see how to do it. So they did all the optimizations they could do, on the SpringBoot side to bring that lower. And I think they managed to bring it to something like, 50, 60 seconds to boot. Which was an improvement, but of course memory didn't go down. And then they wrote the equivalent in Quarkus, and the very first run, I think, started in either 25 or 20 seconds, the same thing, and it took like 40% of the memory.
Okay.
So when they saw that, that was huge for them, right? That was a huge improvement. And then I think they tried also OpenJ9, and boot time went even further down, went down to 17 seconds or 14, and memory even a bit more or less, which was also very interesting. So they got a huge boost with Quarkus. The developer productivity was also, they mentioned a number like 30% higher in terms of how fast they could write code. And that was for essentially SpringBoot users that did the transition. It wasn't, Jakarta ifans or Java ifans. It was like, ordinary developers. So I think that's a good metric. That's a good metric that shows that, it's not that hard. So it was an excellent reference, actually. It was great, and
it's also interesting because what strikes me that it's 2 minutes. So what the origin SpringBoot application booted in 2 minutes, and with some modification, and then was changed to boot in 14 seconds. And what's interesting in my Jakarta E or Java E projects, what usually takes time are the named queries in JPA. So if the boot takes too long, usually there are lots of queries that have to be processed by the database. But it seems like in this particular case, something else was the problem, like, I don't know, bin discovery or dependency injection or whatever. So it was a large app. Why Quarkus were faster? You look at that? So was it like...
Yeah. Well, I mean, the number one thing is a typical SpringBoot app brings in too much stuff, tons of dependencies.
Okay.
And that's usually, the primary reason where, it takes a lot of memory, lot of time to boot. So that's, that's where it starts. And then, of course, so one thing is to reduce what goes into your app. And then the other step, which Quarkus is very good at, is to optimize what goes in. You throw out what doesn't go in, and then you super optimize what goes in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where Quarkus shines. And for me, that gives this new dimension of Java, because Quarkus really does optimize Java. That's its core capability, optimize Java with those intimate knowledge of the frameworks driven by the extensions and this very smart architecture where we generate just the minimum initialization sequence for a framework.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into the jar file. On standard hotspot deployments, no magic there, because a lot of people now, they're playing with Graal and stuff, but we optimize the standard Java use case. Mm-hmm. And then when you start from this very optimized, let's say, initial state, of course, when you give it to an AUT compiler, which is also very good at, dead code elimination, you get this ridiculously small and fast native executable. That's what happens.
And a couple of weeks ago, I migrated for my blog. I have like statistic systems, which is over-engineered on purpose to demonstrate different Jakarta possibilities, and I migrated completely to Quarkus. And it is immediately it started. I migrated what I just did. I replaced basically a stateless EJB with RequestScoped transactional. This is what actually happened. This was my transition. So it took, I would say, with everything, Docker, changing the Docker containers and Docker Compose. This was on my server, so it was a little bit more infrastructure involved. I would say 4 hours everything, and it immediately took less than, it was about half. So it's hard to tell because the old server ran for a month and the Quarkus was fresh. So I just go to HTOP and look at the difference. And it was less than a half. And the interesting part is it was the boot time was incredible fast. So in my case, I didn't have any problematic JPA queries. It was like at most 2 seconds. And before then it was probably 10 seconds or 8 seconds or something like this.
Yeah. And I can tell you a bit more about this. So someone was asking in the forum, all right, so a lot of time was spent at boot time trying to set up the database, connections, blah, blah, blah. So, why Quarkus should be better there, right? And then I talked to Sunny, who's, our Hibernate lead, and he offered this very useful insight, which is on a typical application, Hibernate starts and then it needs to find out the exact type of dialect
exactly
you are talking, and in doing so, it will typically try with load the few classes and then to find the right one and so on. Now every class load will do at least 3 failed attempts in the class loader before it finds the right one, and then depending on the dialects, you may have like 60 of them happening this is at boot time. So with Quarkus, because we do this analysis at build time, we do just 1 class load. So instead of like 60 failed attempts, you have 1 successful one from the beginning, right? And of course, this explains it. This huge difference. So it's not only the let's say the JDBC driver, it's the whole stack above the driver up to your app that makes the application heavy.
You are absolutely right. I forgot about that. So you are also optimizing Hibernate. So what actually you are doing, you are reading, the persistence XML in advanced. You can read all the JPA annotations, and you can actually perform all the optimization at build time. So there is almost no dynamic behavior at runtime. So this is a huge difference. So actually, you can save a lot of boot time.
Yeah. And then, also the same things with the transaction manager. There's some optimization there. So there's a lot you can do. Of course, you might have some issues also, like in the native case, for example. Right now you have to decide what language you're gonna include, right? You cannot change it at runtime because it's built in the image. Well, there are small nuances like this, but it's always a balance, you know. Do you want to go all the way to super optimized? Do you want something in between? But that explains, and people don't know those details, obviously, right? But it's quite interesting, actually.
Yeah. And another reference I have is a startup. I just wanted, to do a podcast with him. I said, no, I have to start until I'm ready. But they're using, we switched to Quarkus, and the application was, I would say, somehow complicated. It's a complicated app with JPA, and it was Eclipse Link. Now it's Hibernate. So we had to migrate over to have the advantages. And also the memory is less than a half. The native compilation worked right away. The whole migration took about a day, as I remember, and the start time is incredible. It's like again, I think 2-3 seconds. And as I remember, the entire application consumed 60 megs of RAM, and before then it was a much larger. So it was it is hard to tell because usually what I did. I'm going to even development, is this minus XMS and minus XMX with half a gig. So most of my servers just consume half a gig because they can. But I would assume it would be not below 256 megabytes. So I don't think so. And even if it were 128, it's still a half.
Yeah.
And we just did it because of simplicity. We just, okay, why not? Just try that. And then with the native compilation, it was way smaller. So it was incredibly small. And this is what I can also tell you. And so this is and the absolute killer feature from Quarkus, I would say, is killing funky conversations, because what I do right now is I build some microprofile or Jakarta app and then launch it with Quarkus, and I show look at this. A CRUD Hello World takes 5 megs of RAM, and now no one complains anymore about memory. And then we use Whitefly, Open Liberty, whatever. And it's like, if we have the chance, we can still at any time just migrate to Quarkus. It's not a big deal, and this kills all superfluous conversations about, I don't know, RAM consumption or overhead or whatever.
Yeah. And maybe going back to Spring Up API support, again, I suggest, you and people look at George's talk. It's quite explanatory.
Devox what? Is this Devox UK?
Devox BE.
Okay. Belgium. Yeah. This is the...
people are confused, when they see it first time. Oh, how you do Spring. And the fact is, we don't include Spring in Quarkus. We don't bring in Spring libraries. We just have some Spring APIs. And then what happens, the extension for that API, it essentially maps annotations onto whatever we use internally in Quarkus. Yeah?
Cool.
So you get this thin layer that brings you the equivalent of the Spring functionality, but all the implementations are, what you will normally use in Quarkus. So, like REST easy, or things like that. So, at the same time, we did a BOF, so we talked about it, and people were surprised. Oh, there's no Spring, so how you do Spring? Well, we emulate it, and then. Someone asked, okay, how difficult this is? And then George explained that, if you know SpringBoot well, and if you know the Quarkus equivalents, it's not that hard, actually. For George, it took him a few weeks or a month at most to implement one of those APIs. So if you can churn out a new API every month, well, in a year, you'll have quite a few, obviously.
Yeah.
And for me personally, that was always my gripe with some APIs. There is a lot of stuff going on in the underlying implementations. So Hibernate has been developed like for 15 years or something, right? And yet, people put this thin API on top and they say, oh yeah, it's great. It's my stuff. Well, there's a huge implementation underneath to make this work. And it's still optimized and it still evolves over those years. But people don't get to see the underlying implementation. There's the thin layer and, they put emphasis on that. But no,
Hibernate
it's not that hard to do thin layers.
Recently, we had a workshop about migrating a 2-tier application to 3 tiers because they were forced to, and so they used an old persistence stuff, and we talk about that, and they assumed this is easy, and then I explained them what happens in the transactions. Then there should be copy of the objects for each transactions, and you will have to know to clone the work set and be very efficient when the objects are translated to SQL, and there's actually no way to implement such a thing during a project. And and this is what developers do not appreciate at first, because if you start with just plain JDBC, a little bit of reflection, you can build Hello World Hibernate in 2 hours, but making something which actually works concurrently, you will spend years. And also, funny story, I was, this was, I don't know, 3 years ago in insurance, and we had a talk about architecture, and say, this is no way that you have something like Hibernate or Eclipse Link maintained during a project. And they said, we are doing this. And I say, what? So, yeah, we have our own, object relational map, and this is not a problem. And then I keep asking, and what turned out is that the insurance company, they have a team of 5 developers to do nothing else than maintaining their own ORM system in-house. But I say, hey, look, 5 people, then I probably more resources than RedHat has to maintaining Hibernate. I mean, then you should not sell insurances, sell ORM mappers. And then they found that what I mean impossible is it is not reasonable to create your own, persistence if you are selling insurance, right?
Yeah. It doesn't make sense. And the same goes for many, many things. Like, imagine wanting to have your own transaction manager, right?
Yeah.
It's just important. I mean, the one we use is 20 years old, 25. Yeah. There's so many edge cases you will never have thought about, So oftentimes we think we're more smart than we are, but we're not that smart, right?
No. and we forget the problems. That's also for me, if you move on, you always forget the old stuff. So we should, I always try to start a new Java SE project without the servers, just to remember threads and everything, because, Jakarta and microprofile is very convenient environment, but you forget stuff just. Questions regarding the migration project. How big was the SpringBoot before the migration, roughly? So was it what was the problem? So how much RAM did it consume? You know that, roughly?
Are you talking about the Vodafone case?
Yes.
I don't know the exact number. I know the percentage, though. The reduction in memory was 60%.
60%, okay. This is also expensive, interesting.
On hotspot, yeah.
Why what it was the problem for the client? If they have lots of instances, this could be the problem. So they could say, probably they hit some hardware limit. They had so many instances, and then they have to reduce the memory. Because, what I'm just saying is memory is usually cheap. But even John, we had some conversation with John Klingen at various conferences, and John also told me some clients, they have problems with RAM. It's why? What's actually the problem? Because what I do not understand is, let's assume, let's assume Quarkus. So Quarkus takes 5 megs of RAM, let's say Hello World, in native mode, but I cannot just start, 1,000 instances on one machine, because if they do something, there's no way that I will get 1,000 threads. The problem is CPU as well. So we just don't need memory. We also need CPUs, you know.
Yeah. Well, the memory argument is very strong because it maps to money, right? Let's say you pay 1,000 now. Well, if you can pay half of it, that's a big deal now. So that's a very strong argument.
Okay.
And then boot time also depends on the use case. You know, in some cases it doesn't matter too much. It matters in development for sure. You know, It makes your life great. But in some cases, you know, especially if you're into cloudy stuff, and we have some demos where, you know, you start with the same cluster, all sorts of different apps like SpringBoot, Node, Quarkus, and then you get this view where, you know, SpringBoot is starting, and then Quarkus has 10 instances serving already. So it's like, you know, it's so nice to see, you know, just scaling up to the thousands and then scaling down immediately. It gives more possibilities, more, you know, more. So that's good. Yeah.
No, you're right, but because I hear now just the memory argument, and this is for me a little bit too simplistic. I say, okay, now look, I mean, memory is cheap. What's your problem? But now I understand a little bit. Of course, there's no reason to know if you can consume less memory, just do it. But it's not like the startup time is, I think, more important for me because startup time or deployment time. So for either way, and startup the Quarkus in both is actually nice. And again, we thought what I really like about Quarkus is this is my old programming model, one-to-one with more efficient runtime. This is the true revolution. This is like, you know, what I don't know whether you are aware, there is a web framework called React, which right now I don't use a lot still because I use the web standards, but a few years ago I used React, 5 years ago. And what they did, they just replaced the rendering engine with something called Fiber. And this is the same old API, but the rendering was like, I don't know, improved twice. And this is for me is a revolution. What is not revolution, like what Angular did, that you had to migrate from 1 to 2, and you have to completely rewrite your code. This could be interesting, but it's not as appealing for me. So, and this is why I like Quarkus, because it's not like I have to learn a completely new API. I just keep doing my old stuff. But if I like, I can also use now the reactive stuff. I can use Vertex right away. For instance, I would never consider to use Vertex, right? Because there would be no dependency on RedHat on another project. For me, it would be mission impossible, or this is outside of this what I'm actually doing. But if, let's say, we are running Quarkus and it ships with Vertex, and we have such a problem, and I mean, this is low-hanging fruit, then just use some reactive programming here locally, and then just write simple code again later. So I would say there's complete new universe of possibilities.
Yeah, and we're lucky. We're very close to the Vertex team, so they actually report to me through their manager. So that's good. You know, I can tell them what we want to do. We did also some optimizations in the core of Quarkus. So there's like a single stack where resources are shared, whether you do reactive or whether you do imperative over servlet, over REST-easy. A lot of efficiency in there, and there will be more. There will be more. And basically, I want to ask you, what would you like to see next coming with Quarkus? The base is there, but we're always interested in community feedback. So, from your point of view, what's missing?
Before I do this, give you an example. So, in not what's to the question before. For instance, Vertex. So in one project, we wanted to push proactively from client to JavaScript app, and usually we'd use WebSockets. We wanted to use SSE because of proxy settings and stuff like that, and firewalls, so server-side events. And I knew that Quarkus uses Vertex, and I told the developer, just look at Vertex. And I say, okay, what I will do, I was not sure whether it would work on Quarkus. I would just use the JAX-RS API, which I knew with SSE Events Broadcaster. And so it worked right away, and behind the scenes it uses Vertex. And the other guys, they really struggled with Vertex because Vertex is extremely powerful. There's lots of settings, but we just wanted to know to push. So actually, I was ready right away. It took for not even 1 hour, and my proof of concept was running. And then we are using right now standard JAX-RS, which uses Vertex behind the scenes. So this is actually a perfect case. What happened? It was 2 months ago. So
it's really your choice. It's really, I mean,
yeah.
It's
but this
great
is just
to stick with a higher level API, and it will
exactly.
be very efficient. Or you can go like with a low level API. Low level, very, you have total control what you want to do if you use directly Vertex, for the more peculiar cases or the more, super high performant ones. I don't know. Yeah. So, best of both worlds. For me, it's a win-win.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what I meant. We stick with the higher level APIs, and if we know more optimization, we could just pick up, the Vertex, which is great. So about the community, what I can tell you, what I get the questions. So, and most of the stuff is covered, but the questions right now is, for instance, I got several questions during the AirHacks TV and also during conferences and projects. What's about password and credential encryption on OpenShift, which is basically covered with your Vault integration. So you have the HashiCorp Vault extension, which this is what community requested, and this is basically solved. What I think is a little bit, this is not issue at all, is OpenShift or Kubernetes integration. Because usually you would have, source to image, but you don't need source to image with Quarkus because it ships with the configuration documentation. So what I do, I just have plain builds with OpenShift without source to image. But I think it's not that clear right now that you can do this. So I did, I created a YouTube screencast doing that. But I get some question. You implemented source to image for Payara and for Whitefly. What I will do with Quarkus, like actually is not needed. And what I would see, like EJB compatibility layer, which just would replace at stateless with RequestScoped and transactional, for instance. So it would make the migrations even almost seamless. Most of the projects. So what you did, with the Spring. By the way, the Spring layer, it reminds me of the Wine compatibility layer on the Linux, right? Like Linux, right?
Yeah.
Similar.
Yeah. Well, EJB, in general, we want to stay away from EJB because it's big. And it probably, if you start, it will, at some place, it will bring more. So in this case, either would have to limit it to some very popular use case, stateless plus something, or else it might blow up and become, like you have to implement 10, in which case, just stick with Wildfly or the other servers and it's going to work as well.
Actually, this could be a community action because what I just thought, just not implementing EJBs, not even, adding compatibility layer, just replacing it stateless with RequestScoped transactional. And another common case is we have singleton startup that the post construct is invoked on boot, which also supports by Quarkus. So there will be the most cases, but you are right. If you start with that, you get, more and more requests, and then you just, playing with the EJB containers. Because my project were trivial to migrate. We don't use a lot from EJBs. What we're just using, the conventional transactions, which you get with transactional, and we use the And the cool story with Quarkus is, I didn't measure this, but I will have to do this. Usually, EJBs were faster than CDI because if you have EJB, it is instantiated once and pulled, and all the dependencies are just cached. But I think with Quarkus, it could be even possible that the RequestScoped is as fast as EJB because you don't do the reflection to identify the injection points. Everything is hardwired. So I think there is, my case where I use EJBs to have 20% better performance than CDI is no more necessary in Quarkus because RequestScoped is reinstantiated on every request. The whole dependency graph does not require reflection to inject the dependencies.
Well, we have to benchmark it, and
this could be interesting. Yeah, I will. Yeah, but it's hard to benchmark this because there is no Quarkus with EJBs. There's just Quarkus without EJBs. So we'll have to benchmark it against Whitefly, let's say, and then this is not that fair. But it could be interesting, right?
Yeah. Well, we would write something equivalent and then see how it behaves.
Yeah, this could be interesting.
It's an interesting comparison, though. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. This, what I get also requests is, not JSON Web Token is well covered by microprofile supporting the entire flow. So this is somehow already solved because Keycloak with the gateway does exactly that. But could be also something so what they would like to do is that if you communicate with Quarkus, does the entire flow with Keycloak, the OAuth2 flow, and then you get the JSON Web Token. Okay. I got this question, but this is, but anything else, I would say, I mean, the main job would be to document all the stuff or, to evangelize the stuff that's already there. For instance, what I really appreciate, small things in Quarkus, CORS. So the CORS filter ships with Quarkus. This is a big deal because usually I have to use JAX-RS, interceptors or servlet filters to set up the CORS headers. I use it, I need it in all my projects. And now I can just say, what is this, netty CORS true, and I have my CORS filter. So, I mean, I would say right now I'm very happy. So we should be careful about what is core and what is universe, and not to overwhelm the community with choices, I would say. So there should be a smart way of maintaining this. This is the problem, So
yeah. No, that's fine. I think we definitely need to do better work. Well, documentation is not bad right now with the guides.
That is perfect.
I know at least 2 books that are coming from different guys. There will be more stuff on the reactive side. I think we're just starting there. And you talked about OpenShift. Of course, it's like a very important target for us to work very well on OpenShift. Now things are a bit fluid also because OpenShift evolves as well, and the tooling around it. It's in many aspects it's a bit of a wild west. This cloud native landscape. So for us also, we start with this assumption and then 6 months after it's something else. But we're looking carefully into it now. We're setting up a sub team to make this better. And I think, you'll see some things coming out from that direction as well.
Cool. So perfect. Yeah. This was a nice conversation with you again. So
yes, definitely. So I'll see you in some conference sometime. I'm sure. And keep it up. And maybe you could do some session with Georgios also. He's our Spring expert, so he.
Yeah, but I have no experience with Spring Boot. I would just convince Giorgio to migrate over to Jakarta, eat the whole session perfectly. It's like, why you are doing this? This would be a disaster, I would say, right?
Indoctrination, yeah.
All right, a podcast session would be nice with him. This would be nice. So,
all right, cool.
Yeah, perfect. So, thank you. And where people can find you again? Do you have your
well, Twitter, Dandriadis, my name. I had the blog. I don't write too often, don't have much time, but Twitter is this thing.
Yeah. Okay. And what's your role again with Quarkus? So how? You spend all.
Okay. So I'm the engineering director. I'm running the extended Quarkus team, as an engineering manager, more or less. Mm-hmm. So Quarkus has people that either are inside my organization, but we also cooperate with other departments in Red Hat. So, trying to make this thing work and make a product out of it. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you a lot.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.